I worked at a big box retail store for 6 years. Night shifts, stocking shelves, dealing with customers who treated me like I was invisible. My wife Felicity's family never let me forget it. Every family gathering, every holiday, every single time we were in the same room, they made sure I knew exactly what they thought of me. Her mother, Brenda, would introduce me to people as the guy who works retail, emphasis on retail, like she was announcing I had some kind of disease. Her father, Carl, would ask me when I was planning to get a real job, and her sister Jade would laugh about how Felicity married down. Way down. Here's what they didn't know. That retail job was the best cover I ever had. I actually ran 3 online businesses from my laptop during those night shifts when the store was dead. Made more in a month than most of them made in a year. But I kept my mouth shut, wore my red vest, and let them think whatever they wanted to think. You want to know why? Because I grew up poor. Actually poor. And I learned early that people who have money and flaunt it become targets. People who look broke get left alone. So I looked broke, drove a 2004 sedan, wore clothes from clearance racks, lived in a small apartment, never took vacations that cost more than a tank of gas. Meanwhile, I was putting money into accounts they didn't know existed, investments they couldn't see, building something real while they laughed at me for stocking toilet paper at 3 in the morning. Felicity knew I made decent money. Not how much, but enough. She knew we weren't actually struggling, but her family's opinion mattered more to her than reality, so she went along with their narrative. She'd complain to her mother about our financial situation, even though I paid every single bill on time, even though she never wanted for anything she actually needed. Her mother would tell her she could do so much better, that she should have married that guy Brett from her college who went into finance. Felicity would come home and repeat these conversations to me like they were normal. Like it was normal for your wife to tell you that her entire family thinks you're worthless. The dinner happened 6 weeks ago. Brenda's birthday, fancy restaurant downtown, the kind of place where the menu doesn't have prices and the waiter looks at you like you're going to steal the silverware. I showed up in my usual clothes, nothing fancy, because why would I own fancy clothes when I'm supposedly barely scraping by? Felicity wore a new dress, designer, that I'd paid for. Nobody asked where she got the money for it. They just assumed she was spending her own paycheck wisely, unlike her deadbeat husband. We sat down, ordered drinks, and Brenda started in before the appetizers even arrived. She told the table about this article she read about people who settle in their marriages, people who could have had so much more but chose comfort over ambition. She looked right at Felicity when she said it. Carl jumped in, said he gives it 2 more years before Felicity realizes what a mistake she made. Jade laughed so hard she almost knocked over her wine glass. She said, "Remember when we all thought you'd amount to something? And now look, our sister married a guy who makes minimum wage and lives in a rental." Darren, her brother, said at least the divorce will be cheap since I don't own anything worth taking. They all laughed, the whole table. Felicity sat there. Felicity. She didn't laugh, but she didn't say anything either. Just looked at her plate, moved her food around with her fork, stayed completely silent while her entire family tore me apart. I excused myself, said I needed to use the bathroom, walked past tables full of people having normal conversations with families who probably didn't hate each other. The bathrooms were down a hallway, and I was almost there when I heard Felicity's voice from behind me. She'd followed me, but she wasn't coming to apologize or defend me. She was on her phone. I stopped walking, stood there in the hallway. She was talking to someone, I don't know who, didn't matter. She said her family was right, that she'd been thinking about it for a while, that she was looking at her options. She said she couldn't do this anymore, couldn't be married to someone with no ambition, no future, no prospects. She said she deserved better than a guy who'd spent 6 years stocking shelves and would probably spend the next 20 doing the same thing. Then she laughed. Actually, laughed. Said at least she'd know better next time. I went into the bathroom, washed my hands, looked at myself in the mirror, went back to the table, sat down, smiled, finished my dinner, laughed at their jokes, thanked Brenda for inviting me, drove Felicity home. She talked the whole way about how nice the restaurant was, how good the food was, like nothing had happened. I agreed with everything she said. That night, I started making calls. I'd been prepared for this moment for years, honestly. Not this exact moment, but something like it. I knew eventually it would come down to a choice between me and her family's opinion of me, and I knew which one she'd choose. So I'd kept everything separate. My business accounts were in my name only. My investments were in my name only. The apartment lease was in her name, only because she'd insisted on it 3 years ago, said it would be better for her credit. I'd been paying the rent through automatic transfers from an account she didn't know about. The car she drove, the nice one, the one that made her feel like she wasn't married to a total loser, that was in her name too. I'd co-signed, sure, but the payments came from me. Everything came from me. And now, it was all going to stop. I called my lawyer the next morning. Guy I'd worked with before on some business stuff. Someone who knew exactly what I actually did for a living. Told him I needed to file for divorce, needed to do it fast, needed to make absolutely sure that every asset I had was protected. He asked me if I was sure. I said I'd never been more sure of anything in my life. He said he'd have papers ready in 3 days. I spent those 3 days moving money. Not hiding it, not doing anything illegal, just moving it into accounts and investments that were provably mine, that I'd established before the marriage that had nothing to do with Felicity or her family or any of them. Turned out that when you keep meticulous records for 6 years and never combine finances, it's pretty easy to prove what belongs to who. Every dollar I'd ever made from my businesses went into accounts she'd never seen. Every dollar from my retail job. The one they all mocked, that was what paid our bills. That was the only money she'd ever known about. And that money was long gone, spent on rent and groceries and her car payments and her credit cards and every other expense that came with keeping up appearances. The papers got served at her office. I wasn't there, didn't need to be. But her coworker Dana texted me about it anyway. Said Felicity came out of the conference room white-faced. Papers in her hand, looked like she'd been hit by a truck. She called me 16 times that afternoon. I didn't answer. She texted 43 times. I didn't respond. She drove to the apartment. Our apartment, her apartment technically, and I wasn't there. I'd moved my stuff out 3 days earlier. Everything I actually cared about anyway, which wasn't much. Some clothes, my laptop, files, a few personal items. I left furniture, left kitchen stuff, left everything that looked like a normal life because none of it mattered. She called her family. I know because Brenda called me, asked me what I thought I was doing. How dare I blindside Felicity like this? Did I really think I was going to get away with just walking away from my responsibilities? I told her I wasn't walking away from anything. I'd paid every bill, every payment, every expense for the entire marriage. Now Felicity could handle her own responsibilities. Brenda started screaming about lawyers, about taking me for everything I had, about making sure I regretted this. I hung up. The next 6 weeks were the quietest I'd had in years. I stayed in the extended stay hotel, worked from my laptop, watched my businesses keep running like nothing had changed, because nothing had changed for them. They'd been running fine this whole time while I played the role of minimum wage retail worker for Felicity's family. Felicity kept calling, kept texting, kept leaving voicemails that started angry and got progressively more confused. She wanted to know why I was doing this, what I was trying to prove, why I couldn't just be an adult and talk to her. I didn't respond to any of it. Then yesterday happened. My phone rang at 6 in the morning. Felicity. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. She was crying, actually sobbing. Barely coherent. She'd just met with her lawyer. Her lawyer told her that in the divorce she wouldn't be getting anything. No assets to split, no money to divide, nothing. Because according to all the documentation, all the financial records, all the evidence, I didn't have anything. Just some retail paychecks that had all been spent on living expenses. Her lawyer asked about my businesses, about my other income. Felicity didn't know what she was talking about. She told her lawyer, I worked retail, minimum wage, night shifts. Her lawyer apparently looked at her like she was crazy. The calls started after that. 219 calls. I counted. Text messages too. So many the notifications crashed my phone twice. Her family got involved. Carl called, threatened to sue me for fraud. Jade called, said I'd manipulated Felicity. Darren called, said he always knew I was a con artist. Brenda called, said they'd prayed every night for Felicity to find someone better, and God was finally answering their prayers by showing her who I really was. None of them could understand it. How could I have money? Where was it coming from? Why didn't they know about it? Why didn't Felicity know about it? Here's the thing they still don't understand. Felicity did know. Not the amounts, not the specifics, but she knew I made more than retail. She just never asked questions because the answers would have complicated her family's narrative. She chose to believe I was exactly what they said I was because it was easier than defending me. And now she's realizing that the guy they all laughed at, the minimum wage nobody who'd never amount to anything, that guy just walked away with everything while she's stuck with car payments she can't afford, credit card debt that's entirely in her name, and rent on an apartment that's about to come due with no automatic transfer to cover it. My lawyer called this morning, said Felicity's lawyer wants to meet, wants to discuss the situation, wants to see if we can work something out. I asked him what there was to work out. The divorce is straightforward. No shared assets, no shared debts, clean split. He said Felicity is claiming I committed fraud, that I hid assets during the marriage. I told him to show them the records. Every account predates the marriage. Every business predates the marriage. Every investment predates the marriage. I never combined finances. Never promised to combine finances. Never hid anything that they bothered to ask about. The meeting is set for next week. Felicity, her lawyer, me, my lawyer. Apparently her whole family wants to be there too. My lawyer said absolutely not. Family members don't get to attend legal meetings, but Brenda keeps calling his office demanding to be included. She's telling everyone I tricked Felicity, that I'm stealing from them, that I owe them something for the years they supported us. Supported us? That's what she actually said. Like their criticism and mockery and constant stream of insults was some kind of support system. I've got all the documentation ready. 6 years of business records, tax returns, bank statements, everything organized and clear. My lawyer says it's the most thorough financial documentation he's ever seen in a divorce case. He asked me if I'd been planning this all along. I told him I'd been planning for a lot of things. Just turned out this was one of them. What I didn't tell him is that this is just the beginning. Because Felicity's family doesn't just think they're better than me. They've been using that belief to their advantage for years. Carl's business, Jade's car loan, Darren's credit cards, Brenda's house refinance. They're all connected, all tied together. And I know exactly where every thread leads because I spent 6 years listening to them brag about their finances, about their investments, about their strategies. They treated me like I was too stupid to understand what they were talking about. Turns out I understood perfectly. And now, I'm going to pull every single thread until the whole thing unravels. Update 1. Shout out to everyone who told me to document everything and keep my lawyer on speed dial. You were absolutely right. The last 4 days have been completely insane, and it's getting worse by the hour. If you thought my original post was dramatic, buckle up. Because this is where everything really started falling apart for them. The meeting was supposed to happen yesterday. My lawyer and I showed up at his office at 9 in the morning. Every document organized, every record ready to go. Felicity and her lawyer got there 10 minutes early. Then Brenda showed up. Then Carl. Then Jade and Darren. My lawyer told them they couldn't be in the meeting. Family members don't get to sit in on legal negotiations, but Felicity insisted. She told her lawyer she needed them there for support. Her lawyer looked uncomfortable but didn't argue. My lawyer said absolutely not. This is between spouses and legal counsel. And if they insisted on having her family there, we'd reschedule and do this in court instead. That shut them up real fast. Carl and Brenda went to wait in the lobby, but I could hear Brenda yelling about her rights the entire walk down the hallway. We sat down. Me, my lawyer, Felicity, her lawyer. Felicity looked terrible, like she hadn't slept in days, makeup barely covering the circles under her eyes, wearing a blazer that looked expensive but had a stain on the sleeve. Her lawyer started with the standard opening, said we were here to discuss asset division and come to an equitable agreement. My lawyer said there were no assets to divide. Everything I owned predated the marriage, every business, every account, every investment. He had 6 years of documentation to prove it. Felicity's lawyer asked to see the documentation. My lawyer handed over a folder that had to be 2 inches thick. Her lawyer went through it. Took about 20 minutes. Felicity sat there staring at me the entire time like she was trying to figure out who I actually was. Her lawyer finally looked up, told her that everything appeared to be in order. All the accounts and businesses were established before the marriage. There was no commingling of assets. Felicity said that couldn't be right. She said I worked retail, I made minimum wage. There was no way I had money before we got married. Her lawyer asked her if she'd ever seen any of these accounts. She said no. Asked if I'd ever told her about these businesses. She said no. Asked if she'd ever asked me about my finances. She went quiet. That's when Felicity started talking. Not to her lawyer, to me directly. She said I'd lied to her, that I'd deceived her for 6 years, that I'd made her think we were struggling when we weren't. I told her I never said we were struggling. She paid for nothing. Every bill was paid, every expense covered. She never wanted for anything she needed. She said I'd hidden my income from her. I told her she'd never asked. She said that's not how marriage works. You don't hide money from your spouse. I said I didn't hide anything. I just didn't advertise it to people who treated me like garbage. Her lawyer jumped in, asked why I'd kept separate finances. I said because Felicity insisted on keeping everything in her name. The apartment lease, her car, her credit cards, all of it in her name because she said it was better for her credit. Her lawyer asked if I'd contributed to those expenses. I said I'd paid for all of them, every single one. But they were her accounts, her name, her responsibility. My lawyer pulled out more documents. 6 years of automatic transfers, every payment time-stamped, every expense tracked. Rent payments, car payments, insurance, groceries, utilities, everything. All coming from an account Felicity didn't know existed. all going to bills in her name. Felicity's lawyer asked why I'd structured it this way. I said because Felicity wanted it this way. She wanted her name on everything, wanted to build her credit, wanted to show her family she was independent. I just paid for it. Her lawyer asked why I didn't tell her about my businesses. I said because every time her family came around, they made it clear that what I did for a living wasn't good enough. So I stopped trying to explain. I let them think whatever they wanted to think. Her lawyer said that was deceptive. I said that was survival. The meeting went nowhere. My lawyer laid out the terms. Clean divorce, no assets to split because there are no shared assets, no debts to divide because all debts are in Felicity's name, and I'm not on any of them. Felicity's lawyer said this was unacceptable, that Felicity had relied on my financial support during the marriage and was entitled to spousal support. My lawyer said no. I'd already provided 6 years of financial support. That support is ending, as is appropriate in a divorce. If Felicity can't maintain the lifestyle she had during the marriage, that's because the lifestyle was funded by someone who is no longer legally obligated to fund it. We left. I went back to the hotel. My lawyer said he'd be in touch. 2 hours later, Felicity started calling again. I didn't answer. She texted, said she needed to talk to me, needed to explain, needed me to understand. Understand what? That she sat silent while her family destroyed me? That she told someone she was looking at her options? That she laughed about knowing better next time? I didn't respond. That night, the first payment bounced. Rent on the apartment, due on the 1st. Automatic transfer I'd canceled 2 weeks earlier. Felicity called at 11 at night, frantic. She said the rent didn't go through, said she'd gotten a notice from the landlord, said she didn't have enough in her account to cover it. She asked me if I'd forgotten to set up the payment. I told her I didn't forget anything. I canceled the payments, all of them. She said I couldn't do that. Those were our bills. I said they were her bills, her name, her responsibility. She started crying, said she couldn't afford the apartment on her own, said she'd need to move, said where was she supposed to go? I said that wasn't my problem anymore. She hung up. The next morning, the car payment bounced. Same story. Automatic transfer canceled, payment due, insufficient funds. The finance company called her at work. She called me from the parking lot, said they were threatening to repossess the car if she didn't make the payment plus a late fee within 3 days. She asked me if this was some kind of joke, if I was trying to punish her. I said I wasn't trying to do anything. I was just stopping payments on accounts that weren't mine. She said I'd co-signed the loan. I said no, I hadn't. She'd insisted on doing it herself to build her credit. Finance company had my information as a reference, not as a co-signer. She could verify that herself. That's when things got really interesting, because Felicity didn't just have bills. Her whole family had bills. And it turned out, over the last 6 years, they'd gotten comfortable with a certain lifestyle too. Carl's business, some consulting thing he ran from home, had been using Felicity's credit for equipment purchases. She'd co-signed thinking she was helping her dad, thinking her husband would cover her half of the payments like he covered everything else. Those payments bounced too. Carl called her, asked why she was defaulting on their agreement. She told him about the divorce, about me stopping payments. He lost his mind, said she'd ruined his business credit, said he had equipment loans coming due, said he needed those payments made immediately. She said she didn't have the money. He said she'd better find it. Jade's car loan, the nice SUV she drove, that was co-signed with Felicity too. Same deal. Felicity had agreed to co-sign thinking it wouldn't matter because her husband paid all her bills anyway. So what difference did one more make? Jade's payment bounced. She called Felicity, demanded to know what was happening. Felicity explained. Jade said this was Felicity's fault for marrying someone unreliable. Said Felicity needed to figure it out because Jade couldn't afford the full payment on her own. Felicity said maybe Jade should have thought about that before laughing about her sister marrying down. Darren's credit cards, 3 of them. High limits, designer clothes, and electronics, all co-signed with Felicity as a backup in case he missed payments. Darren missed payments constantly. I'd been covering Felicity's portion, the portion that kept her credit from tanking, for 3 years. Those payments stopped. His credit card companies started calling Felicity's phone. He called her, said she was destroying his credit, said he had fraud alerts on his accounts now because of missed payments. She told him to pay his own bills. He said she'd promised to help him. She said that was before her husband divorced her. Brenda's house refinance, the one she did 2 years ago to pull equity out for renovations, that required a co-signer with good credit. Guess who co-signed? Felicity, with my money backing her up. Brenda's payment bounced. The mortgage company called. Brenda called Felicity, then called me, then called my lawyer's office. My lawyer told her to stop calling. She called Felicity back, said Felicity had 1 week to make the payment or she was defaulting on the mortgage. Felicity said she didn't have the money. Brenda said then they'd lose the house. Felicity said maybe Brenda should have been nicer to the guy who was paying for everything. You want to know the best part? They all thought they were separate. Carl thought his equipment loans were his business. Jade thought her car was her responsibility. Darren thought his credit cards were his problem. Brenda thought her mortgage was her concern. None of them realized that every single thing was connected through Felicity, and every single thing was funded by me. They'd built this whole elaborate lifestyle on top of my money, and they'd done it while calling me a minimum wage nobody who'd never amount to anything. Now they're all calling Felicity. She's called me 47 times in 2 days. Her voicemails have gone from angry to desperate to confused to angry again. She wants to know how long I'd been planning this. Wants to know if I married her just to set up this situation. Wants to know what kind of person does this to their wife. I haven't responded to any of it. My lawyer says not to engage. Let everything go through legal channels. Don't give them anything they can use against me. But here's where it gets even better. Because they're not just mad at me now. They're mad at each other. Carl is mad at Felicity for not having money saved. Jade is mad at Felicity for co-signing in the first place. Darren is mad at Felicity for not warning him this could happen. Brenda is mad at all of them for being financially irresponsible. And they're all mad at each other for relying on Felicity, who they all knew was married to a guy making minimum wage at a retail store. How did they think she was covering all these expenses? They never asked. They just took the money when it was there and mocked the guy providing it. Felicity called yesterday from her mother's house. She'd moved in after the eviction notice came through. She can't afford the apartment, can't make rent. Landlord is processing her exit. She said she hoped I was happy, that I'd destroyed her life, that I'd destroyed her whole family. I asked her if she remembered the dinner. She went quiet. I said I remembered it perfectly. Remembered every word her family said. Remembered her following me down the hallway. Remembered her laughing about knowing better next time. I said I did know better. That's why I'd kept everything separate. That's why I'd prepared for this exact situation. Because I knew eventually she'd have to choose between me and her family's opinion of me. And I knew which one she'd choose. She started crying again. Said she never meant those things. Said she was just venting. Said everyone complains about their spouse sometimes. I said there's a difference between complaining and plotting your exit. She said she wasn't plotting anything. She was just talking through her feelings. I said her feelings cost her everything. She hung up. My lawyer called an hour ago. Said Felicity's lawyer wants to renegotiate. Said Felicity is willing to accept a smaller settlement if I'll help with some of her immediate expenses. Just enough to get her back on her feet. I told my lawyer no. No settlement. No help. No compromise. We filed for divorce. We're getting divorced. She can figure out her expenses the same way I figured out mine. He said Felicity's lawyer is going to argue undue hardship. I said good luck with that. Every expense she has right now is an expense she took on voluntarily, with her name, her credit, her signature. I never forced her to co-sign for her family. I never told her to build a lifestyle she couldn't afford on her own. I just paid for it while she decided if I was worth keeping around. The court date is in 3 weeks. Felicity's family is apparently planning to testify about my character, about how I deceived their daughter, about how I manipulated the situation. My lawyer says they can testify all they want. It won't change the financial facts. No shared assets, no shared debts, clean divorce. The only thing they can do is make themselves look worse. Meanwhile, every day, another bill comes due. Every day, another payment bounces. Every day, Felicity gets another call from a creditor, another email from a loan company, another notice from someone demanding money she doesn't have. And every day, her family gets a little more desperate, a little more angry, a little more willing to blame each other instead of taking responsibility for their own decisions. I'm not done yet, not even close. Because Carl's business isn't just equipment loans. Jade's car isn't just a co-signed note. Darren's credit cards aren't just personal debt. Brenda's refinance isn't just a mortgage payment. They're all connected to other things, other debts, other obligations. And I know exactly what those connections are, because I spent 6 years listening to them brag about their financial strategies while they called me too stupid to understand. Turns out, I understood perfectly. 3 weeks until court. Let's see how much more falls apart by then. Update 2. Okay, so the comments on my last post were split between people saying I'm a genius and people saying I'm going to get sued for abandonment or something. To the second group, my lawyer laughed when I showed him those comments. You can't be sued for abandonment when you paid every bill for 6 years and only stopped after filing for divorce. But I appreciate the concern. The last 2 weeks have been absolutely wild. Remember how I said they were all turning on each other? That's gotten so much worse. But they're also trying something new. They're coming after me as a united front, and honestly, it's almost funny watching them try to coordinate when they can barely stand each other right now. It started 5 days after my last update. Felicity showed up at the extended stay hotel where I've been living. I don't know how she found me, but I'm guessing she called every hotel within 20 miles until someone confirmed that they had a guest with my name. She knocked on the door at 7 in the morning. I opened it. She looked worse than she did at the lawyer meeting. Hair pulled back, no makeup, wearing sweatpants and one of my old hoodies that she must have found in the apartment. She asked if she could come in. I said no. She asked if we could talk. I said we could talk right there in the doorway. She started crying immediately, said she was sorry, said she never meant for things to get this bad, said she didn't know her family had so much debt tied to her name. I asked her how she didn't know. She co-signed the papers. She said she trusted them, said they told her it was just a formality, said they promised they could make the payments on their own. I asked her if she ever read what she was signing. She went quiet. Then she asked me why I was really doing this. Not the divorce, she said she understood the divorce, but why was I cutting off all the payments so suddenly? Why couldn't I have given her warning, given her time to prepare, given her a chance to figure things out? I told her I did give her warning. 6 years of warning. Every time her family called me worthless, every time they laughed about my job, every time they treated me like I was lucky to be in the same room as them, that was a warning. She said that wasn't fair, that I never told her how much those comments bothered me. I said I shouldn't have had to. She tried a different approach, said she knew I had money now, said her lawyer had explained that I'd been running businesses this whole time, said she wasn't trying to take anything from me, but could I please just help her with this month's rent and car payment while she figured things out? Just 1 month. I asked her what would happen after that month. She said she'd have a plan by then. I asked her what the plan was. She said she didn't know yet, but she'd figure it out. I told her no. She said I was being cruel. I said I was being consistent. She left. 2 days later, Carl showed up. Not at the hotel, at the grocery store parking lot. I just finished loading bags into my car when he walked up. He's a big guy, used to play football in college, likes to remind people of it. He asked if we could talk man to man. I said sure. He said he knew I was upset with Felicity, but this was affecting more than just her. This was affecting the whole family. I said I was aware. He said his business was suffering because equipment leases were defaulting and it was damaging his reputation with clients. I said that was between him and his creditors. He got angry then. Said I'd knowingly allowed Felicity to co-sign for loans she couldn't afford. Said I'd set up this whole situation so I could pull the rug out whenever I wanted. Said it was financial abuse. I laughed. Actually laughed. I told him that Felicity had insisted on putting everything in her name, that she'd wanted to build credit, that I'd paid for everything for 6 years, and the only abuse happening was me getting mocked at every family gathering while I funded everyone's lifestyle. He said that's not how he remembered it. I said of course it wasn't. I asked him if he remembered the birthday dinner. He said that was just jokes, just family ribbing. Everyone does that. I said not everyone does that while their son-in-law pays their mortgage. That's when he told me he knew I'd been hiding money. Said he'd hired someone to look into my finances. Said he knew I had way more than what showed up in the divorce paperwork. I asked him if he'd hired a private investigator to track down money that wasn't his. He said he hired someone to find out the truth. I asked him what truth he thought he was going to find. He said he'd find proof that I'd been lying to Felicity, that I'd hidden assets during the marriage, that I'd committed fraud. I told him good luck with that. Every account predates the marriage, every business predates the marriage, every investment predates the marriage, all documented, all legal, all mine. He said we'd see about that in court. Then he left. The private investigator started calling 3 days ago, left messages on my phone, sent emails, tried to contact my lawyer's office. My lawyer told me not to respond to anything. Let them waste their money. The investigator can request all the records he wants. He's going to find exactly what I've already disclosed. Businesses registered in my name before the marriage, accounts opened before the marriage, investments made before the marriage. The only thing he might find that's interesting is how much money there actually is, and that number is going to make them even more angry. Then Carl's business started having bigger problems. Turns out, when equipment leases default, vendors want their equipment back. When vendors want their equipment back and you're in the middle of client projects, clients get nervous. When clients get nervous, they start calling around asking questions. And somehow, some of those clients ended up with my phone number. I'm guessing Carl's assistant gave it out when clients asked for emergency contacts, probably thinking I was some kind of business partner or investor based on the way Carl talked about family connections. First client called, asking about a delayed project. I told him I wasn't involved in Carl's business and he should contact Carl directly. He said he'd been trying to contact Carl for 3 days and wasn't getting responses. I said that sounded like a Carl problem. He asked if I knew anything about Carl's financial situation. I said I knew Carl had some personal financial issues that might be affecting his business operations. He thanked me and hung up. Two more clients called the next day. Same conversation. I wasn't rude, wasn't helpful, just factual. Carl's having financial difficulties. Contact him directly. Carl called me that night. He was furious. Said I'd told his clients that his business was failing. Said I was sabotaging him on purpose. Said I was trying to destroy his reputation. I said I told his clients the truth, that he had financial difficulties. He said I had no right to discuss his business with anyone. I said his clients called me. I didn't call them. And if he didn't want people knowing about his financial difficulties, maybe he shouldn't have defaulted on his equipment leases. He said this was all my fault, that his business was fine until I stopped helping Felicity. I said his business was never fine. It was just being propped up by someone he called a minimum wage nobody. Then Jade got involved. She called me at work. I don't know how she got my cell number, but I'm guessing Felicity gave it to her. She said we needed to talk about her car situation. Said the finance company was threatening repossession. Said she needed to make 3 months of payments to catch up. Said she didn't have the money. I said that was unfortunate. She said I owed it to the family to help. I asked her why I owed anything to people who laughed at me. She said that was different. That was just conversation, that I was taking it too personally. I said it was personal when someone tells their sister she married down and should divorce me. She went quiet for a second, then asked how I knew about that. I said I was there, at the dinner. I heard everything. She tried to backtrack. Said she was just going along with the conversation. Said she didn't mean it seriously. Said families say things they don't mean all the time. I asked her if she'd been going along with the conversation when she and her family spent 6 years making sure I knew they thought I wasn't good enough. She said I was being dramatic. I said I was being accurate. She said fine, she was sorry. Could we move past this now and deal with the immediate problem? I said the immediate problem was hers, not mine. She said I was being petty and vindictive. I said I was being exactly as generous as she'd been to me. She hung up. Brenda's house situation went from bad to worse. The mortgage company sent a formal default notice. She has 60 days to catch up on payments or they start foreclosure proceedings. 60 days, 3 months of payments, plus penalties and fees. She called me. I actually answered this time because I wanted to hear what she'd say. She started with how disappointed she was in me, how she'd welcomed me into her family, how she'd tried to help me improve myself, how I'd thrown it all back in her face. I let her talk for about 5 minutes. Then I asked her if she remembered praying every night for Felicity to find someone better. She stopped talking. I said I remembered. I was at the dinner where she said it. She said that was taken out of context. I asked her what context made that okay. She said she'd been trying to motivate me to do better. I said she'd been trying to humiliate me. She said that's not what happened. I told her about the businesses, all 3 of them, how long I'd been running them, how much they made. She went completely silent. Then she asked why I'd never told them. I said because she made it clear that what I did would never be good enough. She could have asked. Felicity could have asked. Any of them could have asked what I actually did, how I actually spent my time, what I actually made. They didn't ask because they didn't care. They decided who I was at the first family dinner when I showed up in clearance rack clothes and an old car, and nothing I could have said would have changed their minds. She said that wasn't true. I said then, why did she pray for Felicity to find someone better? She didn't have an answer. Then she asked about the house payments. Said she couldn't lose the house. Said this had been her home for 15 years. Said where would she go? I said she could go wherever people who default on their mortgages go. She said I was being heartless. I said I was being practical. She'd built her life on money that wasn't hers while treating the source of that money like garbage. Now the money was gone, and she was angry at me instead of taking responsibility for her own decisions. She said she'd taken responsibility. She'd co-signed with Felicity in good faith. She'd trusted her daughter. I said she'd trusted her daughter's husband's money while calling that husband worthless. She hung up. Darren called the next day. He was different from the others. Tried to be reasonable, tried to appeal to me as someone who'd been part of the family. Said he knew things had gotten out of hand. Said he knew the family had treated me badly sometimes. Said he was sorry about that. Then he asked if there was any way we could work out a payment plan. Said he needed to catch up on his credit cards or they were going to close his accounts and tank his credit score. I asked him how much he owed. He said across all 3 cards, about $48,000. I asked him what he'd spent $48,000 on. He said living expenses, some travel, a few investments that didn't pan out. I said those sounded like personal choices. He said, yeah, but Felicity had co-signed as backup, and he'd been counting on her being able to cover payments if he had a rough month. I asked him how many rough months he'd had. He said most of them for the last 2 years. I told him I'd been covering his payments for 2 years. He said he knew, and he appreciated it. But could I keep covering them just until he got back on his feet? I asked him when that would be. He said he was working on some opportunities. Should have something lined up in a few months. I said no. He said I was going to ruin his credit. I said he'd ruined his own credit by spending $48,000 he didn't have. He said the family needed to stick together. I said the family should have thought about that before they spent 6 years making sure I knew I wasn't really part of it. He said that wasn't fair. I said neither was calling me a minimum wage nobody at a family dinner while I funded his lifestyle. He didn't have an answer for that. The really interesting part is watching them turn on each other when they're not calling me. Felicity told me this in a call where she was crying so hard I could barely understand her. Brenda blamed Felicity for not telling them about the divorce sooner, said if she'd known she would have made different financial decisions. Jade blamed Felicity for co-signing in the first place, said Felicity should have known better than to tie her credit to other people's debt. Carl blamed Felicity for marrying someone unreliable, said she should have seen this coming. Darren blamed everyone for not having backup plans, said they'd all gotten too comfortable relying on Felicity's financial situation without understanding where the money actually came from. And Felicity blames me, says I set this whole thing up, says I married her knowing I'd eventually do this, says I'm a sociopath who planned this for years. She's not entirely wrong about the planning part. I did keep everything separate specifically because I knew her family would never accept me, and I knew she'd eventually have to choose. I just didn't expect it to happen at a birthday dinner with her entire family laughing while I excused myself to the bathroom. The private investigator sent a preliminary report to Carl yesterday. Carl called me about it. He'd found the businesses, found the accounts, found the investments. He'd also found out exactly how much everything was worth. He asked me why I'd lived like I had nothing when I had everything. I said because having everything makes you a target. Having nothing makes you invisible. And I'd wanted to be invisible to people who treated success as an excuse to look down on others. He said he never looked down on me. I said he told everyone at his wife's birthday dinner that he gave my marriage 2 more years. He said that was a joke. I said it wasn't funny. Court is in 10 days. Felicity's lawyer has apparently filed 3 separate motions trying to delay, trying to get more discovery time, trying to find some legal basis to claim I owe Felicity something. My lawyer says they're all going to be denied. The facts are simple. No shared assets, no shared debts, no basis for spousal support when I funded everything for 6 years. The only question is how fast the judge signs the divorce decree. Felicity called again this morning. She's desperate now. Said her car got repossessed yesterday. Said she can't get to work without it. Said she's going to lose her job if she doesn't figure something out. Said she needs $5,000 to get current on the loan and get the car back. Said she'd pay me back. Said she'd sign papers saying it was a loan, not a gift. Said she'd do anything. I asked her if she'd do anything differently at that birthday dinner. She said that wasn't relevant. I said it was the most relevant thing. She hung up. 10 days until court. Let's see what else falls apart before then. Final update. Well, it's over. The divorce is final, the paperwork is signed, and I'm officially done with Felicity and her entire family. To everyone who said I should have just talked to them or tried to work things out, I hope you're reading this and understanding why that was never going to work. Some people don't respect you until they realize exactly what they've lost. Even then, most of them still don't get it. The court date was 3 days ago. I showed up with my lawyer, every document organized in 3 separate folders, ready for whatever arguments they were going to throw at us. Felicity was there with her lawyer, and the entire family was in the courtroom. Brenda, Carl, Jade, Darren, all sitting in the gallery like they were there to support Felicity through some terrible injustice. They all stared at me when I walked in. I didn't look at them. The hearing started exactly how my lawyer predicted it would. Felicity's lawyer argued that I'd deliberately hidden assets during the marriage, that I'd deceived Felicity about my financial situation, that I'd created a dependent relationship and then severed it without warning. He pulled out bank statements showing the automatic payments that had been going to Felicity's accounts for 6 years, said this proved I'd been supporting her, said I couldn't just stop supporting her the moment the marriage became inconvenient for me. My lawyer stood up and pulled out our documents. Every business registration dated before the marriage, every account opening statement dated before the marriage, every investment prospectus dated before the marriage. Then he showed the apartment lease, the car loan, the credit card statements, every single one in Felicity's name only. He showed the payment history, proved that yes, I'd been paying Felicity's bills, but they were her bills, her name, her accounts, her responsibility. He pointed out that I'd never hidden anything. I'd simply never advertised my income to people who'd made it clear they had no respect for how I earned it. The judge asked Felicity directly why she'd never asked about my finances. She said she'd trusted me to be honest with her. The judge asked if she'd ever specifically asked how much money I made. She said no, but she'd assumed based on my job. The judge asked what my job was. She said retail worker. The judge asked if she'd ever asked what I did outside of that retail job. She said no. The judge asked why not. She didn't have an answer. Then Felicity's lawyer tried a different approach, started talking about the family's financial situation, about how multiple family members had relied on Felicity's ability to co-sign loans and make payments, about how I'd known about this and allowed it to continue. My lawyer objected immediately, said what Felicity's extended family chose to do with their finances was not relevant to the divorce proceedings. The judge agreed. Felicity's lawyer pushed back, said it spoke to a pattern of deception on my part. The judge asked what exactly I'd deceived anyone about. The lawyer said I'd allowed them to believe I had no money while secretly accumulating wealth. The judge said that's not deception, that's privacy. And people are allowed to keep their finances private from their in-laws. That's when Carl stood up in the gallery and started talking. Said he needed to be heard. Said the court needed to understand what kind of person I was. Said I'd deliberately set up this situation to hurt his family. The judge told him to sit down. Carl kept talking, said his business was failing because of me. Said his daughter was losing her car because of me. Said his wife was losing their house because of me. The judge told him again to sit down or be removed from the courtroom. Carl sat down. The judge asked my lawyer if there were any shared assets, any shared debts, any shared financial obligations between myself and Felicity. My lawyer said no. Everything was separate, everything was documented, everything was clear. The judge looked at Felicity's lawyer and asked if he had any evidence to the contrary. He said no, but the situation was still unjust. The judge said the law doesn't care about injustice when there are no shared assets to divide. The divorce was granted, no spousal support, no asset division, no financial obligations going forward. Clean break. Felicity started crying in the courtroom. Not quiet crying, full sobbing. Her lawyer tried to comfort her. Brenda came down from the gallery, tried to hug her. The judge left. I stood up, shook my lawyer's hand, and walked out. The whole hearing took 45 minutes. I was in the parking lot when they caught up with me. All of them. Felicity, Brenda, Carl, Jade, Darren. They surrounded my car like they were going to block me from leaving. Carl started in immediately, said this wasn't over, said they were going to appeal, said they were going to sue me for fraud. My lawyer, who'd walked out with me, told Carl that he was welcome to try, but it would be a waste of money and time. Carl said he'd spend whatever it took. My lawyer said then he'd be spending it on a case he couldn't win. Brenda was next. She grabbed my arm, actually grabbed it, said I needed to think about what I was doing to this family. I pulled my arm away. She said her house was going into foreclosure. Said she had 30 days to vacate, said where was she supposed to go? I said that was her problem. She said I was heartless, said I was cruel. Said no decent person would do this to their wife's family. I said no decent family would treat their son-in-law the way they'd treated me for 6 years. Jade jumped in, said they'd made mistakes, said they'd been wrong about me, said they were sorry. I looked at her. This was the first time any of them had actually said they were sorry. I asked her what she was sorry for. She said for not appreciating me, for not seeing what I was contributing to the family. I asked her if she was sorry for laughing when her father said I'd never amount to anything. She said that was taken out of context. I said no, it wasn't. She said fine, she was sorry for that too. Now, could we please talk about helping the family get back on stable ground? I said there was nothing to talk about. Darren tried the reasonable approach again. Said he understood I was angry. Said I had every right to be angry. Said the family had treated me badly, and he was genuinely sorry for his part in that. Then he asked if there was any way, any arrangement, any compromise that could help them through this crisis. He said they'd all learned their lesson, said they'd never treat me like that again, said if I'd just helped them this one time, they'd make sure I was respected going forward. I asked him why I'd care about being respected by people I was never going to see again. He said because we were still family. I said no, we weren't. The divorce was final. Felicity was no longer my wife. They were no longer my family. I didn't owe them respect, didn't owe them money, didn't owe them anything. Felicity finally spoke up. She said she'd been talking to someone, a financial advisor her friend had recommended, and there might be a way for her to restructure her debts if she could get a short-term loan to catch up on the immediate payments. She said if I could loan her $20,000 just as a loan, she'd sign whatever papers I wanted proving it was a loan, and she'd pay me back with interest. I asked her what collateral she had. She said her good credit. I said her credit wasn't good anymore. She said it would be if she could catch up on these payments. I said that was circular logic. She said I was being deliberately difficult. I said I was being practical. Carl stepped in again. Said if I wasn't going to help voluntarily, they'd find other ways to get the money. Said he knew people. Said he could make things difficult for me. Said my businesses wouldn't be as successful if the wrong people started asking the wrong questions. My lawyer stepped between us immediately. Told Carl that was a threat. That if he continued making threats, he'd be reported to the police and the bar association. Carl said it wasn't a threat. It was a fact. My lawyer pulled out his phone and started recording. Carl, shut up. That's when Brenda started on a different angle. She said I clearly had money, more money than they'd ever realized, and what kind of person has money and watches their wife's family lose everything? I said the kind of person who spent 6 years being called a minimum wage nobody. She said they'd apologized for that. I said Jade had apologized once, right before asking for money. That's not an apology, that's negotiation. She said I was splitting hairs. I said I was drawing boundaries. We stood there in that parking lot for 20 minutes. They kept cycling through arguments. I'd ruined their lives. I'd deceived them. I'd manipulated the situation. I was being vindictive. I was being petty. I was being cruel. I didn't respond to any of it, just stood there, car keys in my hand, waiting for them to finish. My lawyer finally said we were leaving, stepped aside so I could get in my car. I unlocked the door. Felicity grabbed the door before I could open it. She was still crying. She said she'd made a mistake, said she should have defended me at that dinner, said she should have stood up for me all those years, said she was sorry, said she'd been wrong, said she loved me and didn't want to lose me. I told her it was too late for that. She said it couldn't be too late. The divorce had just been finalized today. We could still fix this. I asked her what we'd be fixing. She said our marriage. I said our marriage was over the moment she followed me down that hallway and told someone she was looking at her options. She said she didn't mean it. I said she meant it enough to say it out loud. She asked me what she was supposed to do now. She'd lost her apartment, lost her car, was about to lose her job, had creditors calling her constantly, had her entire family's financial collapse on her shoulders. I said she was supposed to figure it out the same way every other adult figures it out. Get a cheaper place to live. Take the bus. Find a job within walking distance. Stop co-signing for other people's debt. Live within her means. She said I made it sound so easy. I said it was easy. I'd done it for 6 years while her family mocked me for it. They finally left. Brenda said they'd pray for me. Carl said they'd see me in court. Jade said I'd regret this. Darren said I'd be alone for the rest of my life. Felicity just cried. They walked back to Carl's car, all of them piling in together. I got in mine and drove back to the hotel. My lawyer called me that night, said he'd gotten a call from Felicity's lawyer, said they wanted to know if there was any amount of money that would make me reconsider helping with the family's situation. I asked him what he'd told them. He said he'd told them that wasn't how divorces work, that I had no legal obligation to provide financial assistance after the divorce was finalized. They'd said they understood that, but were asking as a humanitarian gesture. My lawyer had told them his client wasn't interested in humanitarian gestures toward people who'd spent years treating him as less than human. The fallout has been exactly what I expected. Carl's business officially closed 2 days after the court date. The equipment got repossessed, his clients found other consultants, his website went dark. Jade lost her car permanently, couldn't come up with the money to get it out of impound. She's driving a 15-year-old sedan her father had in storage, the kind of car she used to mock me for driving. Darren's credit cards all got closed. His credit score is somewhere in the 400s now. He moved back in with his parents. Brenda and Carl's house went into foreclosure. They're moving into a rental, 2 bedrooms. The kind of place they used to say was beneath them. Felicity moved back in with her parents. She took the bus to work for 3 weeks before she got fired for attendance issues. She's working retail now. Night shifts, stocking shelves. She called me when she got the job, said now I must be happy, said she was living exactly the life I'd lived, and maybe now I'd feel like we were even. I told her we weren't even. We were done. She said that was worse. The calls have finally stopped. Took almost 2 months, but they've stopped. No more voicemails from Brenda about God's judgment. No more texts from Carl about legal action that never materialized. No more emails from Jade about family loyalty. No more messages from Darren about second chances. No more calls from Felicity about how she's changed and learned and grown. I got one final message, though, from Felicity's old coworker Dana, the one who'd texted me when Felicity got served. She said Felicity had been telling people at her new job about her ex-husband, about how he'd tricked her into thinking he was poor and then left her with nothing. Dana said she'd tried to tell Felicity that's not what happened, that Felicity had everything during the marriage and just couldn't keep it after. But Felicity wasn't listening. She was building a new narrative where she was the victim and I was the villain. Dana said she thought I should know. I thanked her for the information. Didn't bother me what story Felicity was telling. The people who mattered knew the truth. The court knew the truth. My lawyer knew the truth. I knew the truth. Here's what I've been thinking about, though. Why did they treat me that way? I've had 6 years to think about it and another 2 months since the divorce, and I keep coming back to the same answer. They treated me that way because they needed someone to look down on. Carl's business was never as successful as he pretended. Brenda's house was refinanced because they couldn't afford it otherwise. Jade's car was leased, not owned. Darren's lifestyle was funded entirely by credit. They were all barely holding on, all pretending to be more successful than they were, and they needed someone beneath them to make it feel real. I was that person, the minimum wage retail worker, the guy who'd never amount to anything, the son-in-law they could mock to make themselves feel better about their own financial precariousness. And Felicity let them do it because she needed it too. She needed her family to think she was better than her circumstances. She married the poor guy, but look, she still had nice things, still went to nice places, still lived a nice life. It didn't matter that I was funding it all. What mattered was that she looked like she was doing fine despite her poor choice in husbands. That narrative only worked if I stayed poor, stayed humble, stayed quiet while they tore me apart. The moment I stopped playing that role, the whole thing collapsed. Not just the marriage, but their entire financial structure, their entire family dynamic, their entire way of seeing themselves. They'd built everything on top of my money and my silence. And when both disappeared, there was nothing left to hold it up. Someone in the comments on my first post said I should have just told them about the businesses from the beginning, that this all could have been avoided if I'd been honest. But here's the thing. I was honest. I just didn't advertise. And the moment they knew I had money, they didn't respect me more. They just wanted access to it. The contempt didn't go away. It just turned into entitlement. So no, I don't regret anything. Not keeping my businesses quiet, not keeping my finances separate, not walking away when I heard Felicity planning her exit. I spent 6 years funding people who hated me while I built something they couldn't touch. And when they finally pushed me too far, I had everything I needed to walk away clean. They're still trying to figure out where everything went wrong. They still think this is about money. It's not about money. It's about respect. It's about standing in that hallway at Brenda's birthday dinner, listening to my wife laugh about how she'd know better next time, and deciding right then that there wouldn't be a next time. Not for her. Not for any of them. The divorce is final. The accounts are closed. The automatic transfers are canceled. And I'm exactly where I planned to be 6 years ago when I married a woman whose family would never think I was good enough. I'm free. I'm financially secure. And I'm done playing the role of minimum wage nobody for people who never deserved my time in the first place. They wanted someone better for Felicity. She's welcome to go find him. Just hope he's not smart enough to see them coming.